And welcome to my retirement roadmap. This is the third and final part of the introductory series, where we are now going to focus on the out of the box directions or decisions that are made for my retirement roadmap, this is kind of the I would say is the most intriguing, interesting part of what's going on in this introduction, at least the way I see it. So I've got my website up here, tyrollins.com, and we can scroll here and see that it says ideal roadmap directions, and then I say in parentheses, exceptions may apply. Probably need to change that to exceptions will apply. So we'll go ahead and walk through these. These are kind of like the top 6 ones, the directions that go on with the roadmap, and that are, in my opinion, the most impactful. The first one we talk about here is Social Security. Social Security, in my opinion, is the best investment we can make in our retirement. It is guaranteed by the government and it is indexed for inflation. So the idea here is to maximize the amount that we receive in Social Security. And when I talk about maximize, I'm just going to give a shout out to the software I use, Maximize My Social Security, that goes in and it does an excellent job of helping people, households, typically married households, in deciding how that their Social Security claiming strategy will be. And it uses a present value calculation. Now, this gets a little bit intense. We won't get too much down this road, but it does use a present value calculation, and the discount rate is this safe rate. So that's important. We'll talk about that more as we go along. But for most people, and there are always exceptions, right? For most people, the best claiming strategy is to wait until they are 70 years old to claim Social Security. And that can be a little tricky. Okay, and we're talking about a financial perspective here. That can be a little tricky, but it is typically the best thing to do from a financial and investment perspective. And that's in my opinion, and I am not going to deviate from that. However, there are exceptions. And some of these exceptions are people like, I'm just not going to wait. I don't care. It might be more money, but I'm not going to wait. And some of the exceptions have to do, again, like with the behavioral, we call it behavioral aspects. Like, I'm not waiting. I want it now. I've worked hard. Give it to me now. So that's one piece. And the other is if longevity is a situation where one or either of the spouses has a lower longevity, we have to look at that. Also, another big exception has to do with if in a household where one spouse has significantly higher earnings than this other spouse, typically we're going to get over twice as much, then we do look at that such that we will maximize it so the spousal benefit takes place. Again, some of this people are like, I don't know what you're talking about, and we will cover that later through the educational videos that are on the roadmap to be produced. Okay, so enough of Social Security. If you've already started Social Security, you're like, I didn't wait till I was 7. Don't worry about it. Hey, in a lot of cases, that makes planning much easier if you're already on Social Security. That's enough for that, I guess. Okay, so legal documents. In the second part of this series, in the video that I made, I talked a lot about these legal documents. And where I'm going with this is the roadmap says we do need a revocable trust, a living trust. Now, there are exceptions to that. Some states, it just doesn't make sense to have a revocable trust, but we would need to do some research to make sure that is definitely the case. And in some households, might not be needed, and a simple will might be okay, but because the cost of having a revocable trust is a lot less expensive than one would think if we're using an online. And that, again, the big assumption is that the household has low complexity when it comes to their trust. And then, of course, the other items the healthcare power of attorney, the financial power of attorney. Those are super important to have in place. And I am not a lawyer. I cannot give legal advice at all. So my part as a financial advisor is to encourage to take care of these things. That's really, it's kind of more like a facilitator. I'm not giving legal advice. But the one thing we do need to make sure, any financial advisor definitely needs to make sure that the retirement account, that the beneficiaries are set up appropriately, because that can be a real problem if they are not. There are a lot of horror stories, way more common than we would think they are. So we have to, that part we do need to make sure during our financial planning process that those things are covered. The retirement account beneficiaries. And I'm talking about IRAs and 401ks. Very important. Okay, let's move on. Roth conversions. I would say when it comes to Roth conversions, I might be a little bit biased and a little bit crazy. I love Roth conversions. And if I ever become famous and I'm interviewed and they say, what is your biggest regret saving for retirement? So if someone's going to ask me that, I would say that I did not pay enough attention to Roth. So when I first started saving for 401k, Roth was not around. It wasn't. But it did come into place. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. That was kind of my response. That's kind of interesting for me and my 401k. I didn't pay enough attention to it, and I wished I had. So now I'm in this situation, as a lot of people are, where they need to see how are we going to get our 401ks and our traditional IRAs, how do we pay taxes on them in an efficient manner? Okay? So that's what Roth conversions are. I think they are super important. I'm not going to get into too much detail on here, but it isn't also, Roth conversions aren't also just about lowering our tax bills. It isn't. I think there are other super important aspects of Roth conversions that can help us out, especially they simplify things, okay? And Roth conversions, Roth accounts do not require RMDs, okay, required minimum distributions. So that also simplifies it. And if we are leaving money to our beneficiaries, almost all beneficiaries would love to have that tax already. It's already paid, so they don't have to worry about paying for taxes. They can keep it in the Roth account for 10 years, but let it grow before they have to withdraw the whole thing. So it's just, Roth is an amazing tool that we need to look at, and I think that's super important. But I will say that the Roth conversions, I'd love to say that it's simple. You just plug the numbers into a spreadsheet and you're off to the races and tells you exactly what to do. Not happening, especially because it is dependent on taxes and tax rates, and those things can change, etc. Okay, so that's the third piece there. What my point is in this roadmap, the ideal situation, quote, if it makes sense and exceptions don't apply, would be to convert all of the retirement accounts, qualified retirement accounts, IRAs and 401ks, into Roth. That's the ideal, but it takes time and it needs a lot of analysis. Next, we'll talk about Treasury inflation protected securities. This is something that I also, when I talk about Social Security and how wonderful I think it is, then I look at the tips part and I'm saying, hey, look, these things are my second favorite next to Social Security when it comes to protecting income. That just like Social Security, these tips are inflation protected. And not to get too complicated here, but really what we're talking about is we need to have protected income in place such that if the stock market drops, we have these investments in place that we can let the stock market do whatever it needs. I'm talking about a 5 to 7 year ladder. It can just, the stock market can drop. We do not want to take money out of the stock market when it is low. Okay, so then this gives us, with our tips ladder, we will have places to get money that's inflation protected and it is guaranteed. Well, I can't use the word guaranteed, sorry. It's protected, okay? It's there. And just a simple math here on this is you take your essential expenses, you subtract out income that you already see, such as Social Security. That balance there is the amount that needs to be protected for, in my recommendation, between 5 and 7 years. That's in addition to for most people, 1 year in cash or cash equivalents, so it's available for living expenses. Okay, so that's talking about tips. I'm a big advocate of tips. There will be a lot of discussion about that and educational videos to talk about that to help folks out there. Next is investments. So we talk about tips. That's our bond. Those are our bonds. Those are all we need in the bonds. I don't recommend bond funds. I recommend buying the individual tips bonds. They are secure, they're bonds. So you buy those, and that's it. We don't need any other bond equivalent. That's the way I do it. So, but when we're talking about our equities or our stocks, I like low-cost U.S. total stock market index fund. If you're in a 401k, that's probably going to be a mutual fund. If you're not in a 401k, so you're in a IRA, for example, you should have access to ETFs. Total U.S. stock market. That's my recommendation. There are exceptions, and I will give an example. There's a lot of. I'm a Boglehead investor. If you haven't figured that out, it's going to be kind of apparent, simple. And I have some people in the Bogleheads community who I very much respect and value their opinions, and they are like, you've got to have international investments in the stock market. Now, just very quickly, international means these are companies that are not listed on the U.S. stock exchange, but they are public companies. And so it's like, do I really need that? I don't think so, but I do. So it is an exception. However, I think people are perfectly fine with just the U.S. total stock market index. And we'll get into more detail on that. Finally, debt elimination. And I think almost any financial planner would say, hey, listen, when you're in retirement, you really don't want any debt. And that includes home loans. However, there's a huge exception for a lot of people. And I'm one of those that's in that category because I have one of those really low interest rate mortgages. And it just doesn't make sense to pay it off. So that's something we would look at as part of the financial planning process to see if there are any exceptions that apply there. Okay, so that really gives it does give a view of these 6 main things, the roadmap directions. There are more, but these are the 6 of them. And if you feel like, hey, listen, I like this idea, the way of doing things, I think that's when you may consider the roadmap as a possible fit for you, and we can talk more. On my website, you will see there's this quick intro meeting. You can click on there and schedule a meeting for us to get together and talk some more. Another way is just to directly send me an email, Ty, that's Ty, at tyrollins.com, and we can meet through that as well. Okay, thanks, and I hope you've enjoyed this 3-part series.